Good afternoon, everybody. Oops. So I'm going to present a piece of work on age-based regulations in assisted reproduction and how they have evolved in parallel with the late fertility trends in some high-income countries. So modern medically assisted reproduction, MAR, became available in most high-income countries in the early 80s. And rapidly, some countries saw the need for regulations. So legislation started to define which techniques are allowed. And for instance, today, gamete donation, social egg freezing is not allowed everywhere. Then also who can access the allowed techniques. So that is often defined based on the partnership status, the sex composition of the couple, and men's and more often women's age. And another important aspect of policies is the eligibility to public reimbursement, like what is covered, like the number of treatment cycles, or also whether it is with age limits. And I'm going to focus on that today. So there are different reasons for having age restrictions. First, age limits are often justified by a balance between the costs and effectiveness of allowing treatments at advanced reproductive ages. And that is often because it's justified because success rates in assisted reproduction decrease with age, and also because adverse pregnancy outcomes increase with age. But that's something against which some people argue, saying that, for instance, adverse pregnancy outcomes are better managed thanks to medical advancements, or medical advances can also increase the success rate in ART, as we saw in the previous video. But age rules are also a way of harmonizing medical practice, against which others are in favor, others disagree with in favor of professional autonomy. Another motivation or a concern is regarding the relationships between late parents and their children, like their capacity to raise a child until he's or she is an adult, while others also point the fact that late parents are more often socioeconomically more endowed and maybe more mature, and that would benefit child rearing. And beyond these arguments, there are also socially constructed ideas about what the limits of reproduction are, like what's considered natural to conceive. But that's also challenged by increasing acceptance of late childbearing, and also by the fact that late births are actually increasing. So against this background, and particularly the last point, I was wondering whether age-based policies for assisted reproduction have evolved, like how they responded to these late fertility trends, whether consistently or not. And to answer this question, I wanted to account for the fact that first IVF births, first IVF babies were conceived at different times depending on the country, and they were also followed by regulations, but within different time frames depending on the country. So that's what the figure on the left-hand side shows, and also the fact that late fertility started to increase from different levels and at different times depending on the country. So that's plotted on the right by region, with age-specific fertility rates at 40 plus for women. So to account for that, I grouped countries based on two parameters. First, the degree of permissiveness of their age cutoffs, only for IVF reimbursement. So I consider an age cutoff as restrictive if it's strictly below 43 years old for women, and above it's relatively permissive. And also based on the level and trends of late fertility trends when these age rules were adopted. So for the data, I used age-specific fertility rates from 40 to 49 using the Human Fertility Database and Eurostat. And for legislation, I relied on really different sources, so they are actually listed in the supplementary material of the paper, which has been published recently. So you can look it up if you want more details. Also for the results, there are lots of information in each graph. But to help you go through it, so in black, the black lines are the age-specific fertility rates. And I also put a gray line, horizontal line here, so that's to give you an idea about what can be considered as a high level of low level of late fertility. So the gray line is the average value among all the analyzed countries. And then the vertical lines, you have the large blue one, which is the year when the reimbursement schemes were implemented. And the pink one is when the age limit for reimbursement was implemented. So often they coincide, both lines. So first you have a group of countries where age limits for reimbursement are quite restrictive, so around age 40. And this is in line with quite relatively low levels of late fertility. So that's Central and Eastern European countries. Conversely, that's 2 Scandinavian countries and Greece, where age limits are quite permissive. So there is no age limit to access reimbursement, or at an old age in Greece, 50. And this is in line again, but with high levels of late fertility. So you have here both 2 groups of countries where age rules align with late fertility trends. However, that's not the most common case among the countries I analyzed. So here you have countries where age limits are restrictive again, so below 43, strictly below 43. And these age rules were quite in line with the late fertility levels when they were adopted. But since then, they have not been changed, despite the high increase in late fertility. This is quite similar in this group of countries, so that's countries where age limits are restrictive, but these age limits were adopted when late fertility trends were already high. And also what's interesting is that in countries like Denmark, Japan, Portugal, Spain, first, these countries, they adopted reimbursement schemes, and years after, they implemented an age limit. And quite inconsistent with the late fertility levels at that time. So these 2 groups of countries, they are probably the reasons behind having these restrictive age limits is motivation maybe to limit the social costs of funding treatments, and that may explain the quite restrictive age limits they have. Next, that's Eastern European countries with quite permissive age limits. And this is quite inconsistent with the low or moderate levels of late fertility at the time these rules were adopted, but somehow anticipating the later increase in late birth. And finally, only a few countries have adapted their age rules to increasing late fertility trends. So that's Estonia from 45 to 40, Malta from 42 to 45, and South Korea from 44 to none. I forgot to mention that the dotted lines and the dashed lines, that's when the change occur. But yeah, maybe you would call it. So in countries of this group and the one before, some of the countries like Hungary, Russia, or here, South Korea, that's countries which have really explicitly promoted assisted reproduction as a policy tool to boost fertility levels. So maybe that can explain why they have quite permissive age restrictions or age limits. So this summarizes the different policy responses to fertility trends I identified. But yeah, I won't repeat, and thanks for listening.